Unfinity is the first unset in Magic the Gathering's history to release legal cards into the Eternal formats. The commander of this build, in addition to the supplemental attraction deck around which the 99 of this EDH deck is sculpted, are from Unfinity. The attractions provide a peripheral source of value, and when utilized strategically, they can produce a devastating impact on the game, especially through an attraction-specific conduit like our commander. Through this optimized value engine, we will manage the battlefield and accelerate our resources by creating a chasm-like discrepancy in board states between us and our opponents, all of which will lead us to one victory after another. Myra the Magnificent is a 2/4 human performer for 2 and Izzet colors. That's 1 blue and 1 red mana. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell from our hand, we open an attraction. We may pay X, tap Myra, and exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from our graveyard, and choose an attraction we control that does not have a midway counter on it. We then put a midway counter on it, and whenever we visit that attraction, we copy the exiled card, and we may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. A midway counter merely signifies that an attraction has an instant or sorcery card somewhat imprinted onto it. Before we discuss Myra any further, let's review the attraction card type. Attractions are kept in a separate deck that exists in the command zone. The attraction deck does not count towards maximum or minimum deck sizes. Attractions are artifacts and do not have mana costs. They are not cast, and they enter the battlefield from an attraction deck whenever we open an attraction. When we open an attraction, we put the top card of our attraction deck onto the battlefield face up. Each attraction has attraction lights numbered 1 through 6 on the bottom right-hand corner of the card. There are different variants of the same attraction card with different lights lit up. This feature will be more significant later in this video. The number 1 is never lit up, and the number 6 is always lit up. At the beginning of our pre-combat main phase during each of our turns, we roll a 6-sided die. If we roll a number that is lit up on any of our attractions, then we visit each attraction, and those attractions' visit abilities trigger. If an attraction would leave the battlefield, aside from it being exiled, then it is put into the junkyard instead. Our junkyard is an independent graveyard for our attraction cards. Any spells or effects that affect graveyards do not affect junkyards. Our attraction deck must contain at least 10 attractions, and it must be singleton, meaning that we cannot have any attractions with the same name in the deck, even if the lit up numbers are different. There are 22 EDH legal attractions, and we are going to play with a copy of each of them. Some visit abilities are more powerful and relevant than others, and for the purposes of this build, are considered secondary benefits to copying the instant and sorcery cards exiled by Myra and casting them for free. So now our game plan should be quite clear. With Myra on our side of the battlefield, we want to cast economically costed instant and sorcery spells in order to open attractions. We want to use Myra's activated ability to exile instant and sorcery cards from our graveyard and imprint them onto our attractions. We want to roll to visit our attractions. We want to benefit from our attractions' visit triggers. And, most importantly, we want to copy these exiled instant and sorcery cards and cast them without paying their mana costs. Our Myra-led attraction engine will easily out-tempo and out-resource our opponents. Do not make the mistake of thinking that an attraction build is unworthy of crafting just because it's from Unfinity. Attractions have the potential to be inordinately powerful, and in this video, we're going to show you how. As mentioned previously, there are 22 EDH legal attractions that we can utilize when building our attraction deck. Since our primary goal is to cast instant and sorcery spells for free through Myra's ability, the visit triggers are a secondary focus for us. Therefore, we are going to play with one copy of each EDH legal attraction. Because, for each attraction we open, we can exile an instant or sorcery card onto it. We will have little difficulty in opening numerous attractions throughout the game. As you may have noticed, each attraction variant selected for our attraction deck has the highest lit up numbers available for that particular attraction. This was done purposefully, as it allows us to strategically craft a portion of our EDH deck to ensure that we have heightened odds of visiting our attractions. By visiting our attractions more frequently, we trigger the attraction's visitabilities more frequently, but, more importantly, we copy and cast instant and sorcery spells that were exiled by Myra for free more frequently as well. The more spells we cast, the higher chances we have of winning the game, especially in a build like this one. How can we increase the odds of visiting our attractions? With cards such as Pixie Guide, Will, Blade of Frontiers, and Barbarian Class. If we would roll one or more dice, instead we roll that many dice plus one and ignore the lowest roll. By slanting all of our attractions to trigger when we roll a higher number, we increase our chances of visiting our attractions by rolling 2 dice instead of 1, and then ignoring the lowest roll. This allows us the potential to maximize the number of attractions we can trigger, in addition to maximizing the number of free instant and sorcery spells we can cast. With any of these cards on our side of the battlefield, our opponents will quickly realize that this Unfinity-inspired Myra the Magnificent deck is going to be very, very unfair. Although casting any instant or sorcery spell with Myra on our side of the battlefield opens an attraction, we want to focus on casting economically costed instants and sorceries for the purposes of getting the biggest bang for our mana investing buck. Let's begin with some card drawing spells. Opt and Consider are both instants that cost 1 blue mana and draw us a card after respectfully scrying one and surveilling one. Preordain and Serum Visions are sorceries that cost 1 blue mana but have opposite effects, as Preordain has us scry 2 and draw a card, while Serum Visions has us draw a card and then scry 2. Gitaxian Probe allows us to look at target player's hand, and then we draw a card. It costs 1 blue Phyrexian mana, which can be paid with either 1 blue mana or by paying 2 life. Both Careful Study and Faithless Looting draw us 2 cards, and then we discard 2 cards. These looting effects are great ways to discard powerful instant and sorcery cards into our graveyard for Myra to target. Note that Faithless Looting has flashback and can be cast from our graveyard for 2 and 1 red mana, which then is exiled upon resolution. For more looting effects, we have Izzet Charm, Prismari Command, and Frantic Search. These instants allow us to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. Izzet Charm has 2 other modes that counters target non-creature spell unless its owner pays 2 generic mana, or deals 2 damage to target creature. We choose one of them. Prismari Command also deals 2 damage to any target, has target player create a treasure token, or destroys target artifact. We choose 2 of these modes. Note that Frantic Search allows us to untap up to 3 lands. Tormenting Voice and Thrill of Possibility cost 1 and 1 red mana, require us to discard a card as an additional cost to cast them, and draws us 2 cards. Seize the Spoils follow suit for 1 generic mana more, but also creates a treasure token. Pirate's Pillage and Big Score continue this trend, except they cost 3 and 1 red mana, but create 2 treasure tokens instead of 1. Expressive Iteration has us look at the top 3 cards of our library. We put 1 into our hand, 1 on the bottom of our library, and 1 into exile. We may play the exile card this turn. When chosen strategically, we should have little difficulty realizing card advantage benefits from this sorcery. Speaking of card advantage benefits, Fact or Fiction has that in spades. We reveal the top 5 cards of our library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. We put 1 pile into our hand and the other into our graveyard. Ordinarily, this spell causes fits for opponents, but in this type of build, where certain cards are as valuable in our graveyard as they are in our hand, Fact or Fiction is even more dangerous, and is an equally powerful target for Myra's exile ability. We've drawn cards, we've looted cards, we've rummaged cards, we've exiled cards. Now, let's tutor for cards with Mystical Tutor and solve the equation. Mystical Tutor puts a revealed instant or sorcery card from our library on top of it after we shuffle, while Solve the Equation puts a revealed instant or sorcery card from our library right into our hand. Imagine visiting an attraction with either of these cards imprinted onto it. Keep in mind that our instant and sorcery spell slinging is not just relegated to providing ourselves with additional resources and advancing our board state. We also can interact with our opponents and their board states as well. Swan Song and An Offer You Can't Refuse are 1-mana counterspells. Swan Song counters target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell, while An Offer You Can't Refuse counters target non-creature spell. The controller of these spells respectively create a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying and 2 treasure tokens. Reality Shift and Resculpt are instants that cost 1 and 1 blue mana and exile target creature. The creature's controller respectively manifests the top card of their library and creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Note that Resculpt can exile target artifact as well. Wild Magic Surge and Chaos Warp are more versatile, but also more risky. Surge destroys target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a permanent card that shares a card type with the destroyed permanent. They put that card onto the battlefield, and then put the rest of the revealed cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. Chaos Warp has the owner of target permanent shuffle it into their library. They then reveal the top card of their library, and if it is a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. More versatile, but more risky. Red wouldn't have it any other way. All of the preceding instant and sorcery cards are fine targets for Myra's exile ability. However, we would be remiss if we failed to include some more powerful options secondary to fulfilling our zeal for casting free spells. Mana Geyser adds 1 red mana to our mana pool for each tapped land our opponents control, while Brass's Bounty creates us a treasure token for each land we control. Jeska's Will can either add a red mana for each card in target opponent's hand, or we exile the top 3 cards of our library and we may play them this turn. If we control Myra as we cast the spell, then we may choose both options. We have more card advantage options as well. Inevitable Betrayal has us search target opponent's library for a creature card, and we put that card onto the battlefield under our control. Note that Inevitable Betrayal can be exiled by Myra for 0 mana. Dance with Calamity extends our hand to the top of our library, with some restrictions. We shuffle our library, and as many times as we choose, we may exile the top card of our library. If the total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less, then we may cast any number of spells from among these cards without paying their mana costs. Imagine all of the free spells that we could cast upon visiting an attraction with Dance with Calamity imprinted onto it. Seagate Restoration has us draw cards equal to the number of cards in our hand plus 1, and we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Seagate Reborn is the backside of Seagate Restoration, and if it is in our hand, then we could choose to put it into play through this option. It enters the battlefield tapped unless we pay 3 life. But we would be much better served getting this sorcery imprinted onto an attraction through Myra's exile ability. For card advantage with a side of direct damage, we have Explosion of Riches. This sorcery draws us a card, and also offers each opponent the option of drawing a card as well. As blasphemous as this sounds, the cost of doing so may deter our opponents. Whenever a card is drawn this way, Explosion of Riches deals 5 damage to target opponent chosen at random from among our opponents. Minimally, we draw a card and deal 5 damage to an opponent at random. Imagine if we have 3 opponents and each of them opt to draw a card. Yes, we put 1 card into each of our opponent's hands, but we also deal a total of 20 points of direct damage. Speaking of direct damage, no deck with Ren in it would be complete without a slew of burn spells. Magma Opus deals 4 damage divided as we choose among any number of targets. We also tap 2 permanents, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token, and draw 2 cards. If needed, we can pay 2 Izzet hybrid mana and discard this card to create a treasure token. Fiery Confluence has us choose 3 of the following modes, and we may choose the same mode more than once. We deal 1 damage to each creature. We deal 2 damage to each opponent. We destroy target artifact. Choosing our modes for this spell will be battlefield dependent, of course, but the option of slinging 6 points of direct damage to each opponent is a powerful floor, particularly if we visit an attraction with Fiery Confluence imprinted onto it. For greater impacts on the battlefield, we have Volcanic Torrent and Immolating Gyre. Each spell deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker we don't control. For Volcanic Torrent, X is equal to the number of spells we've cast this turn. It also has Cascade, and is a great spell to have resolve last if we visit multiple attractions at once while Volcanic Torrent is imprinted onto one of them. For Immolating Gyre, X is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in our graveyard. These powerful spells should be able to clear the battlefield of numerous creatures and planeswalkers on our opponent's sides of the battlefield. There is a sub-theme of spells that can completely warp the game in this type of build. For the purposes of mitigating the saltiness felt by our opponents, we will only include 2 of these spells in the forms of Temporal Manipulation and Time Stretch. Temporal Manipulation has us take an extra turn after this one, while Time Stretch has target player, which will be us, take 2 extra turns after this one. As we demonstrated earlier in this video, we have the potential to skew our dice rolling results in our favor, which heightens the possibility of taking every turn for the rest of the game if either or both of these sorceries are imprinted onto any of our attractions. As stated earlier, there is room to enhance an extra turn theme in this type of build, but be prepared for the salt and vitriol to rain down from your opponents. Since our build is centered on instant and sorcery spells, let's include some additional spell-slinging payoffs for the purposes of optimizing this deck. Both Firebrand Archer and Kessig Flamebreather deal 1 point of damage to each opponent whenever we cast a non-creature spell. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, Fiery Inscription deals 2 damage to each opponent, and when it enters the battlefield, the ring tempts us, which creates an emblem named the Ring if we don't already have one. Then our emblem gains the next ability each time the ring tempts us. Now let's peripherally create some resources through our spell-slinging engine. Whenever any player casts an instant or sorcery spell, Niv Mizzet Perrin has us draw a card, and whenever we draw a card, Nivi deals 1 damage to any target. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, Trail of Evidence investigates by creating a clue token, for which we can pay 2 generic mana, tap and sacrifice in order to draw a card. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Stormkiln Artist creates a treasure token. Note that the artist also gets +1/+0 for each artifact we control, and in this build, that is a very noteworthy power boost. Whenever we cast our first instant or sorcery spell each turn, Baral and Karizev allows us the option of casting a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from our hand without paying its mana cost. If we don't, then we create First Mate Ragavan, a legendary 2/1 red monkey pirate creature token that gains haste until end of turn. Speaking of creature tokens, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, Young Pyromancer creates a 1/1 red elemental, and Talrand Sky Summoner creates a 2/2 bluebird with flying. Extending our potential spellcasting triggers to any non-creature spells, we have Saheeli Sublime Artificer and Shark Typhoon. Saheeli creates 1/1 colorless servo artifact creatures, while Shark Typhoon creates XX blue sharks with flying, where X is equal to the spell's mana value. These creature tokens help us twofold, 1 by stunting our opponent's combats through chump blocking, and 2 by attacking our opponents in numbers and overwhelming their defenses. Let's continue filling the 99 of this deck with more cards that synergize with and enhance our attraction-focused build. Since Myra is vital to our success, let's protect her with a copy of Lightning Greaves. It gives equipped creature haste and shroud, and the equip cost is 0 mana. Command Performance allows us to choose 2 of the following 4 modes, but for the purposes of clarity, we are only interested in 2 of them. We open an attraction, we roll to visit our attractions, we get 2 tickets, or we put a sticker on a non-land permanent we own. We do not have any ticket synergies in this deck, and we do not plan on putting any stickers on any permanents, even though we have Costume Shop as one of our attractions. Remember, our attractions are artifacts that are on our side of the battlefield, and we can take advantage of their presence more than just visiting them and casting instant and sorcery spells for free. Whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, Storm the Vault creates a treasure token. This enchantment helps to accelerate our mana, but pales in comparison to Vault of Catlacan, a land into which this enchantment transforms at the beginning of our end step, as long as we control 5 or more artifacts, which is a feat that should be easier than Sunday morning in this build. Vault of Catlacan taps to add a blue mana, or it taps to add a blue mana for each artifact we control. This land's second ability mimics the ability of Tolarian Academy, a land that is banned in the EDH format. As we have showcased throughout this video, we have the ability to put a lot of artifacts into play from both our attraction deck and our EDH deck, and we can reap very generous mana benefits with Vault of Catlacan on our side of the battlefield. Galazeth Prismari gives artifacts we control the ability to tap to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, but we can only spend this mana to cast instant or sorcery spells. Here we can tap our attractions to help cast our instant and sorcery spells. Also, when Galazeth comes into play, we create a treasure token. With Shimmer Dragon, we can tap 2 untapped artifacts we control and draw a card. Here we can tap our attractions to draw cards. Shimmer Dragon also has hexproof as long as we control at least 4 artifacts, which should be very easy for this deck. We have a couple of artifact-driven win conditions here with Cyberdrive Awakener and Rise and Shine. When Cyberdrive Awakener enters the battlefield, until end of turn, each non-creature artifact we control becomes an artifact creature with a base power and toughness of 4/4. The Awakener also gives other artifact creatures we control flying. If we cast Rise and Shine for its overload cost, then each non-creature artifact we control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. We then put 4 +1/+1 counters on each artifact that became a creature this way. Here, we can use our attractions as creatures and attack our opponents for lethal and game-ending combat damage. We have a slew of mana rocks in the 99 of this build for the purposes of ramping our mana. Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Soul Ring are our most impactful mana rocks. The Lotus can be tapped and sacrificed to add 3 mana of any color, but this mana can only be spent to cast Myra. A turn 1 Jeweled Lotus should result in casting Myra on the same turn. Both Mana Crypt and Soul Ring tap for 2 colorless mana. Note that the Crypt has a coin-flipping upkeep trigger that deals 3 points of damage to us if we lose the flip. Arcane Signet taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, while Thought Vessel and Mind Stone tap to add a colorless mana. The Vessel gives us no maximum hand size, while we can pay 1 generic mana, tap, and sacrifice the stone to draw a card. Building a 2-color land base is pretty straightforward. We are taking a symmetrical approach to the construction of this land base, beginning with 8 basic islands and 8 basic mountains. These 16 basic lands comprise almost 50% of the land base. For the purposes of fixing our mana, we have a slate of lands that provide either of our 2 colors, beginning with the best land in the EDH format, Command Tower. It taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Steam Vents is our shock land and enters the battlefield tapped unless we pay 2 life. Sulphur Falls is our check land and enters the battlefield tapped unless we control an island or a mountain. Training Center is our fan land and enters the battlefield tapped unless we have 2 or more opponents. Frostboil Snarl is our reveal land and comes into play tapped unless we reveal an island or a mountain card from our hand. Shivan Reef is our pain land and taps to add 1 colorless mana, or it taps to add 1 blue or 1 red mana, and it deals 1 point of damage to us. Fiery Islet is our horizon land. We can tap it and pay 1 life to add a blue or a red mana, or we can pay 1 generic mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to draw a card. Cascade Bluffs is our filter land. It taps to add a colorless mana, or we can pay a blue or a red mana and tap it to add either 2 blue mana, 2 red mana, or 1 mana of each color. Spire of Industry taps to add a colorless mana, or we can tap it, pay 1 life, and add 1 mana of any color. We can only activate this ability if we control an artifact, which should not be a problem in this build. We can choose either River Glide Pathway or Lava Glide Pathway when we put this land into play. Although we do not get the option of tapping this land for either of our preferred colors, we do get immediate mana fixing by choosing which side of the land to put face up onto our side of the battlefield. Now let's showcase some of the utility options we have secondary to our land base. We can pay 1, a blue, and a red mana and tap Desolate Lighthouse to draw a card and then discard a card, which is a great way to get a target into the graveyard for Myra to exile. We can pay 3 mana, tap War Room, and pay 2 life to draw a card. When Urza's Saga comes into play, and after our draw step, we add a lore counter to it. Chapter 1 allows us to tap it for 1 colorless mana. Chapter 2 allows us to pay 2 generic mana and tap it to create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token that gets +1/+1 for each artifact we control. When the third and final lore counter is placed on to Urza's Saga, we search our library for an artifact card with mana cost of 0 or 1 and put it onto the battlefield. We then sacrifice Urza's Saga. By the time this enchantment land leaves the battlefield, it could provide 2 construct artifact creature tokens and either a Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, or Soul Ring. Reliquary Tower is a land version of Thought Vessel, which provides us with some no maximum hand size redundancy. We can pay 2 generic mana and sacrifice Scavenger Grounds to exile all graveyards. Although we value the cards in our graveyard secondary to Myra's exile ability, our opponents may have much nastier options lurking in their graveyards for which we must have an answer. Although they're not quite utility options, Seat of the Synod, Great Furnace, and Darksteel Citadel are artifact lands that synergize with the artifact interactions highlighted earlier in this video. Although Darksteel Citadel has Indestructible, both Seat of the Synod and Great Furnace are risky options due to the possibility of our opponents removing them from the battlefield with artifact-specific removal spells or abilities. We will take that risk, and hopefully, our opponents will risk playing more games of Magic with us in the future. This Myra the Magnificent build has been added to the Burgeoning Commander Catalog, and this video also becomes the starting point of a Myra the Magnificent EDH deck video primer series. These playlist series can be accessed in the description below, on our YouTube page, or at the end of this video. The Burgeoning Commander Catalog is my personal collection of EDH decks. An EDH deck video primer series showcases the continued evolution of a deck through future appearances on the Up and Up series, during which we update and upgrade decks featured on this channel. The full card list for this build can be found in the description, and be sure to share your thoughts about this Myra the Magnificent deck in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.